Good evening. The Blount County Corrections Partnership Meeting is called to order. We'll read the emergency announcement.
In the event of an emergency evacuation, an alarm will sound. Everyone should exit the building by way of the nearest stairwell in a safe and effective manner. If the nearest stairwell is blocked by smoke, use the other stairwell. Do not use the elevator. Once you have reached the main floor, follow the exit signs to exit the building and quickly proceed away from the building. Please be mindful of others evacuating and of emergency vehicles.
We'll now do the roll call.
Adams.
Here.
Carver.
Here.
Kaler. Here. French. Hedrick.
Here.
Monroe. You have a quorum.
Chair will stand for a motion to set the agenda.
So moved. Second.
All in favor saying aye. Aye. The agenda is set. Chair will stand for a motion to approve the minutes of October 28, 2014.
I'll make the motion. Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor saying aye. Motion passed. Minutes are approved. Item D, public input on items on the agenda. Seeing none, we'll move on to item E, unfinished business. Seeing none listed, we will move to new business. Discussion and possible action regarding utilizing county properties for other options, such as a women's facility. Tonight we have three people here that are very well versed as far as property and the different programs that we have discussed looking into. I think probably it would be best if we start with the Director of Operations, Mr. Don Stallions, that could give us some ideas of properties that could be available for these situations. Mr. Stallions.
I've got Tim Tipton here with me, the risk manager for the county as well. We went through our property and list and everything, and really there's not anything that's empty right now that would be substantial enough to house a facility like you were talking about. The only facility with any major size that's about to come empty is, and we're not showing the time schedule on this one, is the bottom part of Hubbard. But that building is in such a poor condition, and one of the reasons why we're vacating that building is the septic system. It's from the 50s, and it's seen better days. We've had a lot of problems out of that. But as far as vacant county buildings, there's no substantial vacant county buildings at this time that we're aware of. Hubbard, the old Hubbard Elementary School. One of the problems too with Hubbard is you're right in somebody's backyard. I mean, you're literally in the citizen's backyard, which is another factor that I think this committee should consider if you're trying to locate an existing. A lot of the existing buildings, even though they are being used, are in neighborhoods and residential areas.
Can I go ahead? So, any of the buildings that we do have, are they even close to code for someone to live in? I mean, there's a lot of old buildings that are,
Yeah, we don't have, to our knowledge, any building that's to code for residential living or for a residence program that is being occupied. The people that occupy them now, we have a few community centers, we have a town, a city government utilizing one of our old schools. It's mainly older schools that we have. We just recently were able to, we auctioned off, we had the Boys and Girls Club that auctioned off, and then the old Meisner School, which it was very, that building's in bad shape. So.
yeah. So there wouldn't, nothing that someone could stay overnight in and,
No,
yeah,
not without major,
renovation.
yes.
Just to add to what Mr. Carver asked, from a code standpoint, something I am familiar with, just be aware of the fact that detention and corrections is its own set of codes that are enforced through the international codes. And it's not just a matter of people sleeping. There's the whole aspect of them being detained and unable to leave, obviously on their own accord. So there is a lot of things that are required other than just being able to meet overnight stays. There's a lot that really boils down to the fact that there are places in, obviously because it's a correctional facility, that have to be in place. And I really would have to agree with Don that I can't think of anything that would be available that would not institute a lot of money. So.
Commissioner Monroe.
How many empty buildings do we have?
We couldn't find anything that was empty. The Hubbard's the only one that I know that's getting ready to be, and that's only partial of Hubbard.
Partial? I'm having a
Yeah,
hard time hearing you.
there's actually two agencies in the Hubbard building right now. You have the Community Action Agency that does outreach to the community, and then our records department is housed in Hubbard. We're in the process of moving our records over to the Ops Center, and so that bottom part of the old school will be vacated.
So we don't have any empty buildings?
Not to my knowledge.
So they're all rented out or used by someone?
Somebody's using it, or we've auctioned them off, or the last two that we had that were vacant were the Boys Girls Club, and then the Meisner School building.
Okay. At one point, there were some that were put out for bid, and they got a real low bid. Were they sold for that?
Those two were sold. We took, and we're waiting for that to close on the Boys and Girls Club. We actually took it out to bid twice, and then finally took it to auction. And then the Meisner School property, we just took to auction. Meisner School property is actually starting to fall in on itself in certain places.
Okay. What about land? Do we have any land at this point?
I didn't do an exact study on land. The only land that I know of, we have some that have come from tax sales, but those are kind of tied up in legal issues right now as far as people being able to pay their tax off, and that would be a question for the county attorney. Exactly where we're at on some of those land parcels. Those are on top of the world. I know we've got a few parcels up there. Tim, is there any other large land parcels that? We specifically look for buildings. I didn't go out and look for land, but that's usually if the county owns land, it's for that cause, from a tax.
Okay.
Any further questions for Mr. Stines?
Yeah, how much, you mentioned Hubbard, partially empty, the whole building wouldn't be empty?
No, Community Action Center will still be.
Would still be there?
Yeah, they use the
Okay.
kitchen and the top part of the school. If you're familiar with the school, it's kind of built on a hill. And there was a wing that actually you had to walk down steps to that's partially underground. And that is the current wing that's used for our records department. The
Okay.
rest of it is a Community Action group.
How, if this possibility, I mean, how many could it roughly hold if it was fixed up?
I'm not familiar with the codes, and Commissioner Kaler said there's a whole different set of codes. You got to give them per square foot, and I'm not familiar with the codes on what that would
Okay.
hold.
Do you know the square foot of what would be available?
I don't.
Okay.
I'd hate to sit here and guess. I mean, it's an average school hallway from the 1950s.
Okay, so you don't have any data on any tracts of land at this point?
No, I don't. I don't have any.
All right, thank you.
Any more questions? Thank you, Mr. Stallions. Next, I'd like to ask Judge Harrington if she would please come up and give us some insight into some of the things she's looking towards and forward to.
What would you like to know, Chairman?
And I think what we discussed is information as far as a women's facility or pregnant women's facilities and things of that nature.
And I'm sort of at a disadvantage because I haven't been at your prior meeting, so I'm not quite sure when you use the term women's facility. Are you talking about a correctional facility that takes the women out of the current correctional facility? Are you talking about a halfway house, a residential facility, a recovery? Help me out just a little bit because I wasn't privy to the prior discussions.
I think I might be able to fill that in. The drug court has a facility for the men
Yes?
at this time on High Street, is my understanding. And the question, because there's that, the question came, could there possibly be a facility available for women with the drug court? And I don't know if I heard possibly that was something that was being looked into.
And that is true. And anyone who's heard our recovery court staff speak for the last year or two, one of the things that we talk about is a need that we do not have a women's halfway house transitional living facility here within the county. So we are at the mercy of other counties and other programs. There's a waiting list, and sometimes we have individuals that actually sit in the jail for a longer period of time than we intended while they are waiting for a facility to be transitioned to. Yes, we have a transition house that opened last February, here in Blount County. That is actually leased through the Blount County Drug Court Foundation. And I'm going to use the term recovery court because that is, we are in the process of transitioning. It's no longer really under the umbrella of drug court, it's recovery, because there are several different tracks that involve recovery, and I'll get to that in just a moment. But as far as the foundation, we basically had some citizens that were willing to purchase the home and lease it to the foundation, and then the residents pay rent for being able to live in that transition house. We were fortunate because the home had previously been a girls' group home years before. It was in a location, not necessarily a residential neighborhood. It was in close proximity to not only treatment, jobs, the Justice Center, the courthouse, and all of the other areas. One thing that we do run into as you start looking for property is that most of the participants in recovery courts do not either have driver's license or transportation. So walking, bicycling, all of those things are very important as far as being able to make that transition back into becoming a licensed driver and other things. If we had some type of transitional living house for women, yes, that we could transition some people out of the jail quicker in recovery court. One of the things that we have looked at, and in fact, I think Captain Adams, you may know, we are, as always, and Judge Gallegos is here with me, we are constantly trying to find new programs, new avenues, new ways to transition and basically try to help the individuals that are in the Blount County Jail transition to a new way of life. We're very interested, the judiciary as well as law enforcement, in trying to stop recidivism and trying to stop the door continually revolving. We're looking at different things. A lot of what we have done is the judges and the district attorney, public defender, on our own time, and quite frankly, well, there's a trip next week to look at a different type of reentry program in another county that no one's asking to pay for us to go down there and look at that. We're doing that on our own. Judge Gallegos is exploring Veterans Court and is committed to that being under the umbrella of Recovery Court. And if you look at our current jail population, that is a need. We have a need for that, as well as we have a need in Sessions Court for those individuals that have multiple violations, to have a Recovery Court in that situation, not just ran through circuit court where the individuals are looking at prison time. So those are things that we're all doing on our own. We try very hard to come up with new resources, but obviously, as I think that y'all all probably heard me say, nothing's free. And they all cost money, and so that becomes an issue. You're talking about indigent individuals trying to come up with the money for a deposit to make it into a halfway house and other issues. Cornerstone's been good to us and local people, local benefactors within the community. But quite frankly, Recovery Court, even though we are so far past, we're serving a population that so exceeds what we are funded for. When you talk about 35 people and on any given day we have 75 to 80 people, there's a population in the jail that we could actually bring out, but it takes resources to be able to supervise and treat. You have to balance public safety issues with that. Is that, not quite sure, is that what you were looking for as far as?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely.
Okay, does anybody have any questions?
Ms. Monroe?
Approximately what percentage of people that come before you are eligible for the Recovery Court? And these are felons, these are people charged with, not felons, charged with a felony, correct? These are not misdemeanor.
Most of the individuals that come through the current Recovery Court that we have felony offenses, not all of them. We have a couple of people that actually are on diversion that have no prior record, but they have voluntarily chosen to go through the Recovery Court. But most of these individuals are otherwise looking at prison time or lengthy jail sentences. And really the way that we're able to get individuals into Recovery Court is we have that in-jail phase where there's some treatment, there's plans made, treatment plans, and a transition plan made for them to come out of the jail. So they get a shorter jail term, but what we get is a longer time of supervision and more in-depth supervision, which then translates into better public safety because we're doing more drug screens, we're having closer supervision, we have case managers, all of those issues. We're monitoring community service, employment, all of those things, but it takes people. So currently, what we're serving in Recovery Court are those people that otherwise would be looking at prison or long jail sentences. You also have a population in the jail of misdemeanants who are there on first and second violations of probation because they failed drug screens or they've picked up other charges, and we do not have a way to serve some of the misdemeanants and understand that I stand here as a member of the judiciary, as a member of the judicial branch. You are obviously a different branch of government, and so I am not in any way trying to tell you what your solution is. All I can tell you is that if tools are given to us, and Judge Gallegos will speak to this, I stole this from him. You want to come up? That we can only use what's available. And he and I had this discussion earlier, and I feel like I'm speaking about misdemeanors and what's in Sessions Court, but he's actually the Sessions judge. So do you want to speak to that population?
Yes. We're talking about a segment of the population, of the jail population, or the misdemeanor population where we've put them on probation. We've got a lot of people on probation. That's an alternative sentence. It keeps a lot of people from being in jail and running our population up. And I don't know the exact figure, but it's around 1,800 people on supervised probation in Blount County.
That's through misdemeanor,
Through
county,
misdemeanor, that's the
county
general
probation.
sessions court.
That's
I'm
not,
sorry, what was that number?
Was it ever
Well-
about 1,800?
that's, and like I said, that's misdemeanor. That's not through circuit court, state probation, or community corrections.
Can I?
So that's like an effort, that's like an effort for, it's kind of a building process, you know, you don't go from 1 to 10, you kind of build it up, and you hope that you can solve the problem by stopping at 1, but then some people, they won't allow that to happen, and then you've got to go up to a higher level. And so we have some people, they get a violation, we try to get them into the jail and out of the jail quick, process them as quickly as possible. It's very rare. I mean, you got to judge every case individually, but it's very rare for someone to end up having to flatten out their sentence because, again, it's a building process. We're trying to, you know, we don't have enough room in the jail, okay? So we're trying to save it for the ones that you just can't get them to do right, because obviously there's a public safety issue there that we all understand. We're talking about if we had a mechanism, like say these second violators, that's an easy way for like myself, like Judge Brewer and Judge Hedrick, myself, to funnel them into a recovery court, which allows us to get them out of the jail quicker. When we say recovery court, we're the judge in it. We're just calling it a little different. I mean, we do it at a different time of day, different group of people, that type of thing. Because at that point, we could monitor them more closely, and we could also link them up with resources out there, drug treatment, mental health, so on and so forth. So it's just an intermediary step. One is going to drive down your jail population. I'm not saying it's going to solve the jail population problem, okay? It's going to help, I think. You know, for people who don't want to pay to incarcerate them, that's a winner for them. For people who feel like we should be doing more to help people, that's a winner for them. It's just an all-around, you know, positive situation. And all of those people are important, but for me, one of the main reasons I'm really believe and think we need to do it is there's the victim that never was, okay? Because every time you have recidivism, you always have a new victim generally, okay? And so for me, one of the driving forces, I'm sure for Judge Harrington and the other judges, is that victim we ever know about because they don't exist. Because if you stop, you know, recidivist behavior, then there's not a victim, okay? So everyone benefits from that. And then I'll let Judge Harrington talk to them, but for example, I'm talking about Veterans Court, and it's something that I'm determined that we are going to do it, and I need some help on that. You say, well, why would you do like Veterans Court? There's a lot of, say, well, why can't you do that for everybody? Okay? Well, there's a lot of resources. In veterans, particularly with PTSD, they have a whole different set of problems that maybe our other jail population does not have. And when I say it's free, it's not free because we're all federal taxpayers. But what I'm saying is if you can move them into some of these programs, that's not a cost to the county. And an example is 2 people that were in our jail within the last week and a half. We've actually 2 veterans who've moved out of the jail. This is a cooperative effort. One of them was actually one of Judge Harrington's because it was a circuit case. Another one of them was a sessions case set from Judge Brewer that I asked him to move over to me, and I took it and dealt with it. And we don't have a veterans court. We don't have that set up. In Knox County, they run it through their recovery court system. And basically, I don't want to say finagling, that's too strong of a word, but
It's not a very judicial word.
right, it's not a very judicial word, but how I was able to orchestrate it was, of course, the district attorney had to agree, and of course, Judge Harrington had to agree in her case. I talked to the judge in Knox County, who runs the Veterans Court under the recovery court system. I got him to agree, if they were appropriate, could we move them over there, and he supervised them, because they've got their Veterans Court staff over there. And he did. And those are 2 very worthy candidates. One of them was multiple tour Afghan veteran. The other one was a Marine from Iraq, all suffering from various problems based upon their service in the military. And so I think it's a very worthy cause. And I was discussing it with someone the other day, and of course they wanted to get into the discussion of, aren't wars stupid, wars are stupid, so forth. That's not the point of it. And my response to them was, and maybe I was a little shorter than I should have been, when Private so-and-so signed up, he just signed up in service of the country. He didn't decide what war he was going to go to. He didn't decide where he was going to go. Someone far above him did that. But the reality is, those two defendants, it all goes back to their service to the country. And I just think it's a very, very worthy cause. And I think it's something we need to do here in Blount County. And the beauty of it is, the cost is going to be very minimal. And do you mind if I talk about recovery court a little bit?
Yeah, but hold on, I want to interrupt you
All
for
right.
just a second. One thing that you have to understand is that we deal with a very, and Captain Adams can speak to this, we deal with a very small population. And what you have to understand is we're in there day in, day out, and we know these people. We know their stories, we know their background. And I can tell you there's not a one of us that wants to incarcerate anyone. I would love to be doing something else for a living, as far as being able to try to get it turned around and try to find what fits for the person. And the reason that recovery court works so well is we do have a staff that looks at people individually, and we try to place them in the right treatment module, employment module. What needs to happen, and like I said, we know these people, we need more plans. We need more tracks to be able to plug individuals in as far as treatment and recovery and the different issues. For instance, Veterans Court in Knoxville does fall under the recovery court umbrella. The same way there could be issues too, as far as there are individuals who are either on probation or who have cases pending who are pregnant and who have violated multiple times their probation for testing positive for drugs. So you're in a catch-22 in that, how do you grant release if someone's continuing to use drugs, but then you have the cost of incarceration to that individual? These are things that we face every day, and while you're talking numbers, these are real people to us. And we know them, and we know their names, and we know their stories, and there's just not a mechanism in place. One of the things that we've talked about, he has these issues that he's very definite on what needs to happen with the veterans. We could have a similar track for those inmates that are drug addicted but pregnant, to where they came into a recovery court model and came to see the judge every week, and that we monitored drug use and treatment and doctor's appointments and those type things, but then they could be out and we wouldn't have to be incarcerating. The problem is that we just don't have, that does require not a huge staff, a small staff, but you have to have someone to do the drug screens, someone to be the case manager, and someone to monitor that all of these things are happening. As far as then being able to discuss each case, that's something that we do just in addition to our regular duties. So that being said.
When I was talking about, like on the Veterans Court, I said it's minimal cost. I'm not a big believer in where you create multiple, hierarchies or organizations where they pretty much do the same thing. Like, for instance, like on a federal level, you may have the FBI that investigates this type of crime, but then you have the ATF that's doing the same thing. They're both investigating gun crimes. This is an example. So what I'm saying is, we don't have to create our whole mechanism of recovery court for Veterans Court or any of the other, pregnant defendants. We already have a recovery court mechanism. We already have an organization that, frankly, it's under the mayor. Judge Harrington works with it every day. Probation is already under the mayor. So we already have these resources. We're just saying, if we could, like recovery court, like for instance on the 2 veterans I had to get the judge over there to get someone to come over from over there that does theirs to evaluate and see if they're doing the program, because we didn't have the capability to do it. Now that could be done under the current recovery court, but they're just so understaffed right now. It'd just be another burden that we put on them that I don't think that they could handle.
And it's hard to turn people down. I mean, I'll be honest with you, it is very hard. That's why our numbers have gotten so far above what we're actually staffed for.
One thing on cost. Oh, go ahead.
I have a bunch of questions.
Can I say one thing
Sure.
about cost first?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay. One thing about cost, where, for instance, I said 1,800 people on supervised probation in the county, and say that's a mechanism we use to keep them out of the jail because that costs money, so on and so forth. And one day I ran into somebody, and there's this very big misconception. They said, isn't that a shame that we have to pay so much money to supervise all those people? What they don't understand is probation is run through the county. And the fact of the matter is the fact that the county has its own probation department actually generates a profit for the county. So what I'm saying is probation is actually, if you want to put it in the property tax rate, lessening the burden. Because I don't know the exact numbers, I just know it runs in the black, I think that's the right term. And maybe Mr. Vineyard, can you maybe give us a little idea of
Not to put you on the spot.
Last fiscal year, it cost roughly $504,000 to staff and operate probation, and they generated $607,000 in fees.
But here's what is also in there is you're having people who are supervised, who are being drug screened, who are being released into the community and otherwise being monitored so that they don't have to be incarcerated. That's just
And that being said, you try all these things as intermediate steps, and a lot of people will succeed. And that's great. Everyone benefits from that. But then there are some people who just won't. And I mean, you're never going to do away with the need for the jail. I mean, that just isn't going to happen. And another key element is in recovery court, one of the things that make it work is the fact that there's immediate sanctions. And when you sanction them, where do they got to go? They got to go to the jail.
But it's shorter terms of incarceration than what you would normally get for a violation. Okay, sorry.
Okay. When I listened to her speak about the drug court last year, she said that they get 60 days and then they have to enter into everything else.
And that's just the way our program is structured. It's
Right.
run through circuit right now.
Okay. Are misdemeanants actually doing more jail time because we don't have a recovery program for them versus people charged with felonies, I mean?
They could, depending on their number of violations.
Yeah, generally what's happening with that is, if you look at it, there's always like, what do the numbers really mean, okay? For instance, you may look and say, this person is flat, and that's to say when they have to serve out the whole sentence, okay? So like 1129 misdemeanor. You're gonna find some of them in the jail, but what you're also gonna find in there is, they might have also picked up a felony and they got convicted of the felony, or they pled to the felony, and they're basically serving concurrent sentences, okay? So like say I had someone on misdemeanor probation, they picked up an aggravated burglary, which is a C felony, okay? So naturally I did a violation. I mean, you can't have somebody who's picked up a felony running around on probation. I mean, you can't have that. And usually what happens is, say I would give them, I could give them a very speedy hearing, okay? However, what you usually have happen there is the state, through the district attorney, the defendant who has all of his rights to their attorney, what they're doing is, they usually end up, and this sounds bad, they work it out, so to speak, where they're in custody, they ultimately they work out an agreement. It takes a little bit of time because, the state's got to talk to the victim, they've got to talk to law enforcement, so on and so forth. So in the meantime, they actually are in the jail, which those days get added into they get credit on their sentence. So, for instance, my fictitious burglar, okay, he ultimately works out an agreement with the state, and they plead guilty to serving, it's a 3-year sentence. They're going to serve a 1-year split confinement, meaning they do 1 year in the county jail, all right? Well, what happens is, on that misdemeanor, that in and of itself, they never really would have done 1129, and that's the longest sentence in misdemeanor. They ultimately submit to it and say, I want to be revoked, and it gets run concurrently. So, the reality is, are they serving 1129 misdemeanor sentence? They are, but the only reason they are is they're running concurrent felony. If they didn't have that felony, then that would not be the situation. Because I can tell you, I mean, every case you have to do, there's very few people, very few, in and of themselves, that are serving out a straight misdemeanor sentence. It just doesn't happen.
And usually if that happens, it's after multiple violations.
But if they committed a felony, wouldn't they be eligible for drug court at that point?
Yes, but under the current,
But not a misdemeanor?
Well, under my fictitious person, if they went into drug court, if that's ultimately what got worked out, then the simple thing is what I've always done, what Judge Brewer's always done, what Judge Hedrick has always done. It's a complete package. And then the state may come in and say, we want to dismiss the violation on the Sessions Court case, or we want to agree to, or we say, you know, they had 60 days, we give them a 60-day sentence and then release them to unsupervised probation to drug court. So it's not keeping them. I can't think of one defendant where said, no, they're on a misdemeanor, they can't get in there. That doesn't happen.
once they've been assessed and approved for drug court, and there's a plea agreement for them to come into a drug recovery court, then everyone, the sessions judges, we all work together to try to get that defendant out of the jail within the 60 days after they complete.
What percentage of people in your drug court are misdemeanors and not felons?
There's not, I can't think of any, maybe one or two off the
So
top
it's
of my
not
head.
happening. What you're telling me is not, it's not, the
Well, the way
misdemeanors
our
are not
program-
winding up and, they're not winding up and,
Because the way our recovery court is it's structured for, right now, felons and those that would otherwise go to prison. We don't
Okay.
have a recovery court geared towards misdemeanors. Years ago, and keep in mind that recovery court has gone through many different transitions over the years, really in a response to funding. Because when it started in 1997, it was federal dollars and it was grants, and we contracted with Blount Memorial Hospital to provide the treatment. And year after year, it was always reinventing the wheel. At one time, we had two different tracks of drug court. One track were for those individuals that immediately went to outpatient treatment. So you didn't serve the 60 days in the jail. For those that had the lower level offenses or were earlier in their drug addiction, we had a track that you stayed out of custody. And then we had a track where you did the 60-day in jail phase. What the beauty of that was that if you didn't make it in track one on the outpatient, then we had a second option for the 60 days to where we could still continue to work with the people. But then through different funding issues and loss of grants and just some of the dollars went away, we didn't have that ability anymore. So now basically really because the sheriff and Captain Adams and everyone has cooperated with us, that's the only reason why we're able to do this 60 days in the detention center.
okay. When they get out after the 60 days, where are they staying?
Where are they staying?
Yeah, are they staying at that facility, or are they staying in?
There's a
family?
high percentage of the people that get out now that if they're men, they go to the Blount County Drug Court Recovery or Transitional Living House. And lots of times we are, because at any given time we may have people there that violate, or that we have to put them in for a week or 2 weeks to discuss a new treatment plan. But obviously, space is a continually changing issue. We do have some people that they complete the 60 days and we have to wait for a bed to open at our transitional living house. We refer some people to programs in Nashville, and we have a high percentage, I say high percentage, but several individuals that go to Courthouse in Chattanooga. We also have a program in Smithville that we work with, and we have places in Knox County. Right now, I mean, it's just a matter of putting them on the list and us trying to find a placement as soon as possible where we believe they will be successful, and then moving them into that next step.
Do they have to go to a facility, or are they allowed to go, like, live with their mother?
If they have, or they believe that they have an appropriate home placement. But the reality is most do not.
Yeah.
But they can make application when they're in their first or second week of the jail program to go home. And that's brought before the team, and that's looked at as part of a treatment plan, and then we partner with Child and Family to do intensive outpatient. But that is considered. We have some individuals that go home. It is a very small percentage.
Okay, and I understand why. But the women, are you sending them out of the county after they do their 60 days?
Yes.
So there's none of them that are staying in county at this?
There is a house here. It is not technically what we would consider a halfway house or a transitional living house, but typically what we use with that house is if they've completed a program in Knoxville and they're coming back over and they need temporary housing until they can get a deposit together for an apartment, find a roommate, or whatever, then there's a place here where they can live. But it is not what we typically approve as the first place you go out of the jail. Because keep in mind, part of this is to also finding a recovery community. You may have a perfectly fine home to go to and a very nice family, but you know, they may not understand recovery, and that may not be what you need right at that moment.
So is the number of women in the program less because there's less facilities, or do they stay in the jail longer because they have to wait for a facility?
I would say, and off the top of my head, I mean, we sit at staffing, and yes, I mean, we've had women that have had to wait.
Okay.
We've had men that have had to wait.
Yeah.
I mean, we are at the discretion of these other facilities and halfway houses.
So once they do their 60-day sentence in jail, some of them are still sitting there.
Mm-hmm. But they still continue, as long as they are in compliance with jail rules, et cetera, participate in treatment group.
Okay.
While they are there and waiting on the transition.
Oh.
And I don't know, Captain Adams, I mean, there's a few that wait for a while.
Okay, well, roughly what percentage of the people that come before you with drug crimes are eligible for the drug court? I know it has to be nonviolent. I mean, is it that everybody that meets those requirements is eligible, or do you have to screen them even finer because you don't have enough room? How many people are in drug court or recovery court?
I have drug court and recovery court in the morning, so I don't have the latest figures. We were at 70-something last week. So I don't know until, like I said, until in the morning exactly what the figure will be. What happens is most of the time negotiations for recovery court happen in sessions court with a scenario just like Judge Gallego said, and then they apply. Recovery court's a voluntary process, but once again, the reason that we're able to get so many people to start the program is that we dangle the carrot out that you can get out of jail a little quicker. You just have to do it our way. And you're shaking your head, but there is this phenomenon that a lot of people will tell you. You can come to court in the morning and they'll all tell you, I got in drug court because I thought it would get me out of the jail faster. And then they'll say about 2 or 3 weeks into it, they realized that there was more to it than that. So it's really an incentive-based program, trying to move them through the jail a little bit quicker. It's voluntary, can't have a violent felony or a pending violent misdemeanor.
And so there's no recovery court in sessions?
No.
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 And do you have the staff or mechanism to make that happen?
No, and that was a part of me being here tonight. Of course, I want to answer your questions, but that would fall under that umbrella of recovery court. We don't need a separate director. We don't need a separate secretary. We don't need anything separate. They just need some more help.
And I need to tell y'all, because I hope, we've not discussed this with Director Gallion. She's probably going to have a heart attack if she hears that we were up here talking about this, because they are. I mean, they are stretched very thin as it is. But when you look at, and especially we've had all these discussions, you're having your meetings about the jail, but it's not like we're not over at the Justice Center also trying to come up with different resources and different things. I mean, we've been doing that since before you had a committee. I mean, that's just the nature of the process. So in trying to figure out what's something that we could do, that's in place. And when Judge Gagas was talking about the 2 veterans that Knox County agreed to take for us, their program does have several different tracks and several different areas that you can sort of put individuals into where they are appropriately placed.
I assume with it being misdemeanors, it would be less violent. So would a higher percentage of people in your court be eligible for something versus her court?
Well,
not necessarily. You have misdemeanor assaults.
Yeah.
But keep in mind, under the recovery court umbrella, there are recovery courts that are run through juvenile court that address family issues. There are recovery courts that address domestic violence. There are lots of different tracks and lots of different issues that can be addressed. It's just a matter of placing it under that umbrella and then finding the resources to handle each track.
So we don't have any hardcore statistics right now of 50% would be eligible or 32%.
No.
We don't have any numbers.
But you know, a lot of them would be, and you've got to start somewhere. We obviously do a very high volume in session score, okay? I'm sure you know that. So, you know, what do? You pick the group that is most obviously in need. And so what I'm saying is, you know, some people, I know a lot of people say when they get in trouble and they're just back. We get a lot of people, we see them one time, we put them on supervised probation, we never see them in court again, they do everything they're supposed to, they never get violated, you know, we get all their court costs paid in full, and their sentence ends. You know, that's a victory. I mean, that is a very low cost for the community. I mean, because the fact we've already established the probation office that they're going to, they're paying for. So
Right.
It's not even a cost of citizens. So what I'm talking about is the ones where maybe they're on their second violation, perhaps their first, I mean, various things like that. It's just an intensive level. It's somewhere between, okay, supervised probation and sitting in the jail. I mean, there's an area in there, and I think we could fit some of them in there. Now, that being said, they're not all going to be successful, okay? They're just not.
And even in
Some will.
And even in felony court, and here's, if you can't, and like I said, we deal with people, and I understand wanting to talk about statistics, but if you're in there day in, day out, and you know these people, they're not statistics. And so you run into these issues of the guy that's had 32 arrests, and you keep him in recovery court for 3 years, and he doesn't have any arrests. And that's the longest, I mean, the most he'd ever gone was 3 weeks without an arrest. Okay, he relapses, all right, at the end of that 3 years. Well, that's still, in my mind, that's 3 years of him not out there committing crimes every other week, and we address the relapse. There's just...
It's
Yeah,
the victory
when I-
that never was,
Never,
and the
right.
cost is low comparatively,
Yeah.
you know, to incarceration booking process.
And when I reference statistics, I'm not
Oh, I
in any
understand.
way
It-
looking at people as statistics, because that's
And I
a
didn't mean to say it-
horrific way but what statistics will do is give you an idea of how much we have the chance to improve and how much we need to budget. And, you
Right.
know, I mean,
And I didn't mean that to come across that way. It's just that you cannot, because I don't know how many times at drug court staffing, we have been looking at who we're going to take into the program, and there's 11 of the 12 of us sitting there saying there is no way this guy's going to make it, but we're going to take him anyway, and we're going to give him a chance, and that's the very guy that's going to graduate. So you can't, I mean, there's not a way to gauge how that's going to work.
Right, and when she's talking about staffing and the drug court team and so on and so forth, we're not talking about where you've got to hire this whole new body, because her team is made up of Judge Harrington, and of course she works for the state. The district attorney, they work for the state.
Matt Garner works for the
Matt
state.
Probation, some work for the state, you know, and ours would be county.
Community Corrections
You
works
see
for
what
the
I'm saying?
state.
Your team is made up of people already in the system. Where you need the extra, though, is the recovery court. Like, for instance, under Ms. Gallion, where she needs that extra staff, because as you picked up on, she's talking about, we got to find them this place in the county or whatever. You know, somebody's got to do that legwork.
Well, and when you talked about too, there is an assessment process. You know, just because you want to come into drug court, you still have to have a clinical assessment, whether it be a SASE or an MMI or some other way to do that.
That's why I had to send those two over to Knoxville, because we didn't have the ability.
Right. So you have to have an assessor to see if they're clinically appropriate. We have individuals that aren't clinically appropriate, and then you have to have a treatment specialist.
well, is it your all's opinion that the number one area where we could improve the jail overcrowding and society as a whole would be through more resources for drug rehab recovery? Is that
Well,
the number
I mean,
one thing
ain't
that
gonna
we
hurt.
should?
I mean, Captain Adams, would you like to
You know,
address that?
I mean, that's my opinion, but I'm trying to, yes, go right ahead.
Yeah, you're going to get more bang for your buck right here, what our
With
two
the drug.
judges are talking about. Conservatively, I would estimate that at least 70% of our jail population. If they're not in there on a drug charge, they are in there on a charge that relates back to a drug problem. They broke into their grandmother's house to steal her pain pills.
And
Okay.
other statistics, I mean, and that's conservative.
That is
Basically,
very
that's
conservative.
conservative.
I think it'll help. Now, I don't have a number or statistic, and I wouldn't want to, promise something, say this is going to solve all our problems, because it's not going to solve all the problems, but it's going to help. The reality of it is, though, we're never going to put the jail out of business. That's just not reality.
Nope.
And recovery courts require jail space, because the sanction, accountability is key for everything to work correctly.
For
recovery
instance-
courts give you personal responsibility.
For instance, I show up in the morning and I have an individual that showed up tonight at group and they tested positive. Well, the beauty of recovery court is it's not going to take weeks to address that positive drug screen. They're going into jail in the morning and they're going to serve either a 48-hour sanction, a week sanction, whatever they fit into our module. And we as a team are going to discuss what led up to the relapse, how we're going to address the relapse, and what's going to be put in place for when we get them out of the jail. Without that mechanism, because it's accountability, it's safety, there's a lot of issues, not only for the community, safety for them, and it also gives us that chance to address it. We have some individuals that we have to put back in the group that's in the jail. That they come in, we're not going to kick them out of the program, but they may need to sit for 2 to 4 weeks so that we can clinically assess them again and figure out what treatment response. Because you can't do cookie cutter. Every single person's going to be different as far as the treatment response. But the jail is a necessary part of the recovery court process.
Commissioner Kaler?
Thank you. I do not want to interrupt this dialogue at all, but I want to play off of something or comment on something that Judge Harrington said a minute ago. And I'll paraphrase. She alluded to the fact that while we have this committee and have been discussing these things, they've been discussing them long before we ever formed a committee. And for that purpose, and I want to put this in the form of a motion, I'll make a motion for the purpose of discussion, if nothing else, that we add both Judge Gagos and Harrington to this committee as ex officio members. And obviously that depends on their willingness to do that. But for the purposes of discussion, I would like to, rather than have them stand out here and answer our questions, let's let them be a part of the decision-making process.
I'll second
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
No, thank you. The only thing that may prohibit that would be, one, the judicial code of conduct,
Right.
and the separation of power issue. But, I'd have to look into that, but I guess the ex officio doesn't have any power on your body, you just answer questions, right?
Well,
Is
and
that how it works?
we need to say it's non-voting.
No, well, maybe I used the wrong term. I Googled it.
Oh, okay.
And I know that there is, like you said, there's a judicial branch and a legislative branch.
Right.
Whatever role that you can fulfill on this ad hoc committee, and still not violate your side, I think it behooves us to make you a part of the decision-making process instead of having you come and speak before us, speak with us.
well, and we need to obviously do some research
Yeah,
and check on that. We want to
I mean, I'm not opposed to
cooperate.
it personally, I just
Right,
wanna make
I'm
sure
not
that-
either. We want to cooperate. And obviously, we're standing up here talking in terms and legal jargon that you're probably like, what are you? It's a different world that we live in. And so anything that we can do that provides information or a spirit of cooperation, we're all for it.
Right, well, the interesting thing about it, for, separation of powers purposes, for instance, we can't tell you or force you or make you give us facilities or tools or anything like that.
No.
But then on the other hand, you can't say what tool you can use. Let me make this analogy. The fact of the matter is, if our project, our job was to build a house, okay? And you gave us a handsaw, all right? You said, that's the only tool we're going to give you. Well, we can build that house and we're going to use that handsaw. But if you give us, a skill saw, a miter saw, a crosscut saw, you're going to end up with a better product. Now, the interesting thing about it is, under separation of powers, you can give us those tools, you just can't say, but you're going to have to use it in this situation. You're going to have to use this situation. I mean, that's just not how criminal justice works, because obviously every case has to be treated independently. And we already have state law that's got all, kinds of sentencing requirements and so on and so forth. So the point is, we love to be able to work collaboratively, appropriately.
Right.
And we're just, one part of our discussion tonight is, we wanted to throw a tool out there that we're hoping that you all like. We can't make you give us any of that, okay? We can order it, we can whatever. But we think it's a tool that's gonna help in the overall picture. That's up to you guys.
Let me tweak my motion then. I make a motion that we allow you to explore the possibility of you becoming part of this committee, and if that proves to be okay, that we make you, whatever the term is that you all decide on, part of this committee. Would you second that?
That'll be fine.
Okay.
Yep.
I think, did you have?
Well, I just want to let you know that I'll be going to the first, I guess, recovery court now. I'm on the board starting as of the 17th of next month. So hopefully I can be able to bring some information back to this committee in regards to what's going on, and hopefully forward movement with that court. So I just want you to be aware of that. So
Thank you. Welcome aboard.
yeah, thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion on that motion? And let Mr. Vineyard
I
read
didn't
that.
word this exactly like you said it. Let's see if this is,
The motion is to add Judges Gallegos and Harrington as ex officio members of this committee if permitted by the Judicial Ethics Code.
And law.
And state law.
And you need to
And you
say.
put non-voting members.
Yeah, non-voting.
Ex officio is non-voting. That's
Well,
what capacity I'm here and
Well,
I can't vote.
that's what my understanding was, but Jerome Moon told me that technically you need to specify that they're non-voting.
I'll add that
in-
language. Ex
they're legal
officio
people, they
/
should appreciate
non-voting members.
Even if it was allowed, we don't want to vote.
Yeah, yeah. You spoke of different tools. Do you apply different standards? Like, I'm sure some people come in that are addicted to Oxycontin, and they're not the same as somebody addicted to cocaine or heroin. Do you all have different programs for different drug addictions?
What I currently utilize through the recovery court that we have running through circuit, Judge Seth Norman, who is the pioneer of drug courts in the state of Tennessee, runs a program in Nashville called DC4. And that's a residential treatment program. It is a premier program in the country. And so if we are not equipped to deal with someone who's addicted to methamphetamine. So our meth individuals, someone comes from Nashville, from DC4, and assesses them, and they're allowed to do that within the jail, and then we actually transfer them to Judge Norman's program in Nashville if it's a meth case, because we're not equipped to deal with that. Also, too, we have some individuals that are really just too much for our program the way that it's structured, that 60 days is not enough. Last year before, this was the year before, Governor Haslam, they opened the Morgan County Recovery Court, which is near the Morgan County Residential Correctional Facility. And it is a campus-based program that is right there outside the prison, but you go there for 9 months to a year, and then you come back to me in like phase 3 of our program. So we do have some individuals that their addiction, their criminal record, other issues that I'm not necessarily equipped to deal with, and we have 2 programs that we can send them to, and then they'll come back to me in a later phase. As far as the differences in cocaine addiction, oxy, those type of things, we deal with all of that with our clinical assessment, and then we address it with treatment plan.
Okay. Who is paying for those when they go out of the county? Are they paying for it, or those programs?
It's all run through state funds.
State, okay.
Your bigger cities, the Davidson counties, the Shelby County, and Chattanooga, they had a different type of drug court money allocation than, say, we do in the smaller jurisdictions. And part of the agreement was for them, when they got when Judge Norman has his program, that then they would take people from other counties. The same way with Morgan County, that's paid for. And we use those a lot. The problem is that we have a waiting list to get into Morgan County and DC4, and they have to sit in the jail while they wait to get in those programs.
One of the ironies of, I don't know if it's an irony, but like state law, for instance, when you're talking about, if you're looking at saying that person's in the jail in this misdemeanor, you know, and they're awaiting process, you may look and say, well, you know, if you looked at it closely, why did Judge Geiger reset that 4 times? That type of, what you've got is, for instance, you could be charged with first-degree murder, okay? You are entitled in the state constitution to a bond. However, you may have a probation violation on a misdemeanor, but you're not entitled to a bond, okay? So that's kind of, I know that's because you started post-judgment. So the reason I'm explaining as far as like, you know, maybe it was reset 4 or 5 times through this passage of time, like, well, what's going on here? A lot of time what's going on is that's where that evaluation is going on, where the state may be looking, the DA may be looking at, do we think this is a good person for drug court? And they've got to be evaluated. The defendant and his attorney are trying to evaluate, do we want to try and get in drug court? You know, so they're waiting on these things to happen. And so what's happening is, yes, there technically are in there, like perhaps my probation violation, and it's not getting adjudicated because we're trying to bring it to the point where they conclude everything. So that's kind of an anomaly, and that numbers don't really tell the whole story. If they were just in on a violation in and of itself, well, that wouldn't happen because we just say, hey, you know, we're either going to have to have a hearing, or you know, there's going to be some agreement with the state as to a split and fine or whatever. And so that's kind of that's what's going on with that a lot of times.
What's so hard is there's not one defendant that's exactly situated like the next defendant. They're not. Their charges are different, their bond issues are different, their violations are different, their criminal history is different.
Well, going back to figures, if we were to pursue a women's facility, how many should we design it for?
Depends on what kind of facility you're looking for. Is it similar to the transitional living house that we have for drug court? Are you talking about a place for us to send those drug-addicted pregnant inmates that we don't have another place for? Are we talking about a halfway house program to where misdemeanants can have a chance to come out on some type of supervised release? It really just depends on the specifics. You know, immediately, a house similar to the one that we have on High Street would be full tomorrow.
But they're not in custody. See that? They're not in custody. I think when you talk about building things, like Commissioner Carey's talking about, there's a huge line between, are you actually in the custody?
Right, they're not in custody. That's transitional living.
Right.
So you don't have the same requirements and the same issues. We're
I
just,
think the point that Mr. Allen's making about like Hubbard or the downstairs is, if you're in custody, you got a whole lot more requirements on you.
that's why we prefer transitional living.
Yeah.
Can somebody provide us with a list of all the facilities that we have and what their functions are and roughly how many they house so we can study that and look at it?
What do you mean facilities?
Well, you just named, we have this on High Street and we have this and.
Well, we have the only place that Recovery Court is utilizing here in Blount County is our High Street house for men, which is, but we're talking about, there's Cadus in Chattanooga, those type issues, I mean, those type of places where we send other people.
Well, that, and then you named different, you just said those are not, you know, incarcerated people. They're,
right.
Can you provide you or someone provide us with a list of all those types of, with the classification, this is this, it's used for this, so that we can start to wrap our heads around, because you just said there's multiple types, you know, and I understand that.
There are.
But
Some are private organizations.
we need
A lot
to
of them are
figure
private
out where we
organizations.
need to prioritize and what we need to look at developing. I mean, you know, what
I
do
can do
we
is I
need to
can't give
develop
you
for women, you know, because there may be 3 or 4 options.
I can't give you an exhaustive list of everywhere, but I can give you some examples. I can jot down some examples of different places that we use.
Can I suggest that to you, that I'm talking about even being a starting point of even being similar Because when I'm talking about expanding recovery court, what we're talking about is just a way to supervise some people, to keep them out of any kind of institution. So the beginning point would be, you know, expanding our recovery court, because, and then you have no, the county's not gonna be housing them until,
Well-
of course, we just can't, you know,
Okay.
they make too many mistakes, and then we have that issue. So a beginning point would be to help, perhaps, is just expanding recovery court. And I'm not even talking about building buildings, I'm just talking about having
Well,
some staff.
Where the
you know,
issue is staff. And if you talk to the individuals in our program that are successful, it is very staff-driven, it is very personality-driven, it is very hands-on. It is not necessarily where you live, it is your interaction with not only me in court, the accountability of coming to have to face me, but of being supervised by Amy Gallion, by their probation officer, by having to be accountable in treatment and in group. It is very person-oriented, and that's the driving force behind the recovery court is the people. Not necessarily the facility. Yes, that is an immediate need that we have, but really you don't have to have a facility to start expanding.
I think at this point, we've got the motion on the floor in a second. Let's have Mr. Vineyard read that one more time, what we're voting on.
Motion by Commissioner Kaler, seconded by Commissioner Monroe, to add Judges Gallegos and Harrington as ex officio non-voting members to this committee, if permitted by Judicial Ethics Code and state law.
Is that?
Do we need to do that in the form of a formal resolution, or do we just send that to the commission as a recommendation?
We just send it as a recommendation.
Are you sure we've talked a lot?
Rhonda can do that from
Yeah.
the notes.
Yep. Roll call.
Adams? Yes. Carver?
Yes.
Kaler? Yes. Hedrick?
Yes.
Monroe? Yes. Pass 5 votes.
Motion carries. Do y'all, do you still have a few more questions for the judges?
Haven't we overloaded you a little bit, or?
No, I think it's great, but the recovery court program, could, Judge Gallegos, could your veterans court be incorporated
under-
within that?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
And then the drug court, and then you, Judge Harrington, you were talking about different tracks.
Well, here's the reality. He is very interested in a veterans court and is very well suited to that role, and I'm going to brag on you because he has prior military service and is very committed to that. And then you've got, you know, my issue and the court that I have and my commitment to that. You've got Judge Hedrick, who has expressed an interest in wanting to have a recovery court. You have individuals who all are willing to do the work and are really interested in us trying to meet the needs of the population.
On your dream sheet, what would that recovery court look like? I mean, staffing wise and
We would have to go back and sit down with Director Gallion and find out exactly, and we'd have to look at the population that we could potentially serve. We'd have to sit down with us as a group and look at that, and we could come back and discuss really what that would look like. I think immediately you have to have, if you're going to have different tracks, the immediate need is going to be an assessor, someone who can go in and do assessments all the way across the board for all the different tracks. So someone who can administer those SASSEs and the different testing to get that information back to where they're going to go. So that's an immediate need. That's one person that could serve all different tracks.
Right, that's what I'm talking, that's why I'm saying we don't need any new directors.
Right.
We just need some people under the current director to be able to do these things, like for me, like on Veterans Court, basically. As long as they have the capacity to do the evaluations and do whatever paperwork type of things that needed to be done, that's all I would need. Because see, most of the Veterans Court team is going to be made up of people already in the system. For instance, a member of the DA's office, a member of the Sheriff's Department, these are already employees.
Well,
okay?
and everybody's on probation. So the probation officers, you know, everyone that's going to come in, they're part of the team, but that's a source that's already being used. It's not an additional source. Where you could run into some additional source is a case manager. possibly for each track, someone to manage that group of people as far as their issues. But as far as supervised probation, different facilities, they participate voluntarily. Someone from your detention center comes to our staffings, and that's already in place. So you're not talking about a huge number of additional people, but the only way it's successful is if you're appropriately supervised and if the issues are immediately addressed.
Yeah, you can't not supervise them, and you can't not know what's going on and be able to keep your finger on it and deal with the issues, and that's what you need that staff.
But for instance, and I didn't mean to interrupt, but last week in recovery court, last Wednesday morning, Casey Williams from the Blount County Library came. And she sat through court, and immediately afterwards, there were already some programs in place at the library that she can plug some of our individuals in as far as employment opportunities. That's not costing any additional money. The grant was already there. It's just a matter, though, of trying to bring all those people to the table, and you do have to have a small number of staff, though, to keep all of the information flowing and to stay on top of the issues. And that's the case managers.
Well,
Commissioner
like in
Quinn.
the Veterans Court, see, we already know who the treatment provider is going to be. They've got all these things through the VA that they can plug them into, and then ultimately, you know, I would be monitoring that. I would be dealing with the disposition of the case. So it's even simpler because we already know who the provider is going to be. And it's our paper. So.
Commissioner Carver.
Do you know how many is staffed right now at the recovery court?
How many do we have now? We have Director Gallion, we have Case Manager George Norton, we have Treatment Specialist Stephanie Monday, and we have an Administrator, Deanna Reed.
And you've got 75 clients.
I follow up on that. Is that staff state staff or local staff?
Would you like to address that?
Good segue. I was going to make this comment. Local resources used to be accounted for in a separate fund because we received resources sufficient to pay all the cost and expense. In my short time here, I've never heard anyone speak in an uncomplimentary way about the successes of the program. And unfortunately, we've never had people step up and meet the financial obligations. So this fiscal year, we made that a part of the general county fund because it operates, it doesn't pay for itself.
We do have a state grant.
That's correct.
We do have a grant, and I can't remember if it's 50 or 70, but we have a grant. And then there's also an amount of court cost collections that are earmarked for a drug court fee.
It does generate revenue, but it doesn't pay for 100% of itself. And I think we become a victim of our, you know, sometimes the corner we back ourselves into. All probation is not the same.
Right.
Just like all cases aren't adjudicated the same way. And I think we get hung up on, well, it's going to cost us something. Well, the something is it's costing us to incarcerate people, and unfortunately, that's the most expensive means to deal with something. And in my professional career, the one element that the public understands less than any other element of public service is the judiciary. And if you've ever been a victim of crime like I have, I don't really care what it costs. I want the SOB thrown under the jail, not just in the jail. And that's the problem we've got as society. We don't pay attention.
And you have to understand that we have a code of judicial conduct where we are not allowed to really explain or comment or say. So there is a reason why a lot of people don't know exactly what happens on that side. We're prohibited, and rightfully so, from a lot of discussion. I mean, it makes me a little nervous even being here talking to you in the way that we've talked today. But recovery court does allow us that dialogue in a different way.
In my mind, what we need to do is frame the issue not as it's going to cost us this much to do X, Y, or Z, but we're going to spend this dollar to avoid spending $5 more. That's probably the better way to frame it.
Yeah, I don't.
And just the human aspect of it, and I'm telling you, I personally, for me, it's very compelling. The victim that never is. That's very important from a public safety standpoint. If you can stop recidivism and you can fix some of these problems, then somebody else isn't being victimized. And that's just, you know.
Well, and then there's just, as a community, I mean, it's why we all like to live here. I mean, it's because we are invested And just because they're in the jail doesn't mean that they're not a member of this community. And it doesn't mean that we still don't have a duty to try to address the issues, to try to prevent more crime, to help that individual. And I will say this, I mean, next week, we're going to our third school system. Our recovery court participants, by the end of this school year, will have spoke to every freshman in the county. And they will have talked to them about the issues and the things that they could do to prevent. They talk constantly. They're out there giving back to the community. They're performing community service. They're at the Boys and Girls Club. They're everywhere. They are invested in the community and are worth us investing in them as well. So there's a lot of hidden things that people don't really realize that they're out there doing. They're working for what we're providing.
I wanted to go back and comment on about, for instance, like I use the example of county probation and that operates in black. And when I say that, Mr. Vineyard is exactly right. There are certain elements of the judicial system that they are financially a burden on the taxpayer.
Yes.
And that's just the way it is. And there's not, I'll give you an example. Law enforcement, we don't want law enforcement generating their own funds, okay? I mean, that's an area where they don't have the capability to fund themselves. And in fact, I think actually on a national trend, we've seen a problem where kind of reversing, I've noticed on a national trend, like some forfeiture things and so on and so forth. So the point of it is, there are certain things in the system, you know, and perhaps like a recovery court. It may be that it doesn't run, you know, in the black. It may be that it is somewhat of a financial burden on the taxpayer. But of course, like Mr. Vineyard says, is it a lesser cost than another alternative we have? It's one of those tools, you know, I may have to use a more expensive tool because I don't have a cheaper tool to use. So when I said that, that's not disparaging any organization that can't run in the black. A lot of counties, you know, around the state, everything runs in the red. And we, as part of personal responsibility, the judges in this county, we believe in these people, their personal responsibility. If they can pay the freight, they ought to be paying. And that's why we all work hard in collecting these court costs and these probation fees.
But
you know, there's some counties or parts of the state where some of the judges say, that ain't any of my responsibility. I'm a judge, I don't deal with it. I personally, I don't ascribe to that, and that's why all of these things where we can appropriately collect the money, we do it, and that's why you see like county probation, you know, running in the black. That's why you see the clerk's office running in the black. That doesn't happen in a lot of counties.
Which is why in the morning when I'm at staffing, one of the things that we'll talk about each participant is where they're at on their court costs, where they're at on their job. If they're not working, then they have to do community service, the equivalent of a full-time job. I mean, it's all there, but you have to be supervised and you have to enforce it.
There's an accountability element of that too. Of course, this financially takes the burden off taxpayers, but there's an accountability element of it. You did wrong, and that's frankly part of your responsibility to get right. And I think it's very important. I think it's very important for a number of reasons.
Are you sure? We've talked a lot. You may not want us on this committee.
That's all right. Commissioner Monroe, you recognize.
I don't think that anybody up here is adverse to spending some money. I mean, we know we need to spend some money. We got a major problem here. And what he said is absolutely true. But I just figure-wise, so those numbers of probation, that had nothing to do with recovery or drug court.
No.
Those numbers you said, 504.
No.
Okay.
That's just county probation.
Okay, but so this would be a county program. You get a part state subsidy, and then the county would pay the rest, and then fees would pay some, essentially.
It already is a county program.
Yeah, I know, but I'm talking about expanding. That's
Right.
what I meant.
That-
Yeah, expanding it would be, yes.
what
it'd
did
It would be an
we-
expansion of an existing county
Yeah.
program.
What did we spend roughly last year beyond the state, what the state gave us?
We were, was it 8,000?
I think that's right.
Does that sound
That
about
was the
right?
year, yes, 14, I
That was
think we
the
were about.
first year, though, that our revenue predictions fell short of,
Well, the grant got reduced, I
Yes.
think. We were using an existing grant, and it wasn't sufficient to cover everything like it had been. And part of that, I think, was because it was the infancy of the program, and we just hadn't been paying enough attention to it, I think, from the financial side in my office and the commission, frankly.
I plan on obviously pursuing if there's some kind of money we can get as the Veterans Court element of it, and then that will inure to the benefit of the whole recovery program. That's what I'm saying, if it's under the umbrella.
Well, and you talk about there's a lot of recovery courts across the country have grant writers, have people that have a person dedicated to funding sources. We can't supervise the people that we have right now and also write grants, and I mean it's just there's just not enough time and people to go around. But there are other sources. But keep in mind, when it all started was back when federal dollars were plentiful and these programs were well funded.
Well, for instance, and for ethical reasons, we can't run programs, frankly. Like, for instance, like county probation. Actually, the mayor is in charge of county probation. Now, we deal with them on a daily basis, the judges do, but we can't be in charge of the probation department, okay? Just because of ethical reasons, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So,
We preside over the courts, but that's...
can I make one more statement? I don't want anyone to misinterpret anything that I've said, and I think I can speak for you. We're not saying you don't have a facility problem, a capacity problem.
You do.
We're just throwing, because you do. We're throwing out there, this is something that we think can help, not only help the facility, but frankly help the community. But please, don't think I'm saying, don't take away from here, I'm saying, this is going to solve all of our jail problems, because it isn't. Okay? I mean, we make the best effort, but
It's a step in the right direction.
step in the right direction. Exactly. Thank you.
Commissioner Monroe?
Okay, one of the things that this report talked about was that we needed better software to run analysis and identify more eligibility, have better classification. Would a software, any kind of software program, it was talking about, digital records and different things too, beyond that, that's core. But what we're speaking about now, when I've asked you how many, you say, well, you'd have to go sit down. Would any kind of software help make that easier?
There's a state software system, Tinwits, that our drug court is in the process. We're about completely switched over to that. Yeah, sure, software helps, but if you're going to be spending any money, you're going to get more bang for your buck by staff. I mean, that's just, you have to have staff to supervise the people. And software is great, but it's not going to matter when you go in and there's an attorney standing in court with the defendant and you've got that file in your hand and you're talking to the guy one-on-one about whether or not he's going to fit into this program. I mean, and software's not going to really identify some,
Right.
but it's very
Personal
people-driven.
interaction, these are people who don't make good decisions. Personal interaction, you can develop a rapport with them. And some of them will really rise to the level, to the occasion. Some don't. But that's through personal interaction. That's not through, we got this great looking reporter and they had.
But if you've got this much money, then a software program is not going to be as much bang for your buck as a person.
Okay, the only reason I'm asking is because we don't really get any hard concrete numbers. And it would be nice to know, are we looking at moving 30, 40 people out of the jail over the next year? Are we looking at more? I'm concerned about misdemeanor.
I'll say this, this will make a significant impact on the jail. It won't fix it, but it will make a significant impact.
What you're going to find too is that's going to be hard to quantify, because see, what I'm talking about is like the victim that never is. How do you quantify that? It's the inmate that never is. Because for instance, like say I'm talking about my person after the first violation, and if I have something more intensive to put him on, maybe fix the problem, well, he's never an inmate again. So I didn't really move him out of the jail. We just kind of created an environment where we didn't have to deal with him in the jail later. See what I'm saying? And so that, can we perhaps move some directly out? Well, for instance, like the 2 veterans, those are examples that moved out, and Judge Harrington. But there's going to be a greater effect on the ones that we never needed to put them back in the jail.
Well, and some of this takes time. And when I took the bench in June 2011, we had 25 people, roughly, in drug court. And then over the time, we've seen more success. And a lot of that's our director, as far as the staff that she's put in place and the success that she had. And we had more people wanting to participate in the program. So a lot of it takes time to build up, but you couldn't have told me in June of 2011 that I would have this many people.
Mr. Vineyard?
Two comments, and I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but I think what I'm hearing you say is we have to put resources in place in a defined solution for you to be able to direct people to those solutions.
Correct.
And while I agree with Commissioner Monroe, I'd like as much data and facts as I can get. It's more of an art than it is a science.
I would say that that's true.
So that's kind of how I'm processing all this. And then the benefit is we're at a good juncture in time where we ought to be planning for whatever solution and direction this body wants to go. I mean, it's budget time, folks.
Well, and hopefully this will help in maintaining certification, you know, an effort to try a big effort, you know, that hopefully that they would recognize some of these efforts.
Proactive step on our part,
Right.
that we're doing something
So,
in place.
Ms. Monroe?
I completely agree that, I mean, these are people and it's a dynamic situation, but we do have a budget and that's what, yeah, and I'm asking for numbers, like how many women are in this program, and I don't get any solid numbers other than there's 1,800 misdemeanor on, you know, probation. And I understand it's a dynamic, fluid situation.
And you
know,
also have to understand this. I have a regular docket. I am a state court judge that I preside over criminal matters, domestic matters, civil matters, and I have a full-time docket. And in addition to my full-time docket, I do recovery court.
Yep.
And I spend a tremendous amount of time on recovery court. It's not just tomorrow morning from 8 to 10 that I'm going to be in recovery court. There is not a day that goes by that I don't stop what I'm doing multiple times a day to address an issue. And in that, to be honest with you, I am going to spend my time addressing the issues and running the court, as well as doing what I've been elected to do and appointed to do, as opposed to spending the time trying to run down numbers. I don't have it. I don't have the time. I don't have the capability, and quite frankly, cannot step away from my other duties to get it.
right, but if we were to give extra funding for extra staff, we need to know roughly
Exactly.
how many cases you're talking about. I mean, those are important factors.
They are.
And I mean, I'm
and-
concerned about the fact that we have people with misdemeanors that may not be getting into a program and may be sitting in jail longer than people with felonies. I mean,
what
that
we need-
concerns me.
What we need to do is bring
You know.
probation and the drug court to the table and have them actually sit down and try to identify the numbers, along with Captain Adams may be able to help us with that a little bit as well.
A thing that concerns me, you're talking about some of them, you're concerned with the ones that may be sitting in jail longer.
And they may need to.
Because of it. Yeah, that's what I say.
Yeah, but
One of the things that really worries me a lot is, and the reason why I want to expand the recovery court is, there's ones out there that really should be in jail, okay? But we don't have room for them, and probation's not good enough. Those are the ones that really scare and worry me a lot. And so there's people like that. And so this is, I mean, there's just so many aspects of recovery court. Maybe we keep them from, you know, recidivist rate. We don't have the dignitaries. We're able to, you know, public safety issue. I mean, it all just comes together, and I really think we get a lot of bang for your buck.
And trying to identify what you mean as far as staff, that's really going to come from, we start with Director Gallion, talk to her about what tracks they're talking about expanding, and then she needs to really have the discussion, what needs to be in place for X number of people. And that's really where we need to start, that if we have this number of staff, we can service 20 people. If we have this number of staff, we can effectively supervise 40 people. And then start there, and then look at the population that we're looking to serve, and maybe go that direction.
Mr. Vineyard?
To clarify a point I made earlier when I said all probation is not the same, What I mean by that is, it is more time and staff intensive on the drug court side of things than it is on the program that Joni runs. And so I would look at it more as an evolutionary process than a real defined, well, if we got $20,000, we can handle X more people. I mean, it's going to morph.
Right, and frankly, I know this is for another day, but frankly, they don't have enough people in their department. I think you could probably imagine. I mean, somebody supervising, a couple hundred people or more, that's really not sufficient. So, but, it is what
Well-
it is. We deal
But
with
it's
what
gonna
we
be a
have.
help anyway we're looking at.
Well, and what you're talking about too is it's as fluid as the drug problem. I mean, we've not just dealt with Oxy, and Oxy's going to be staying the drug of choice. It's going to morph into the next. I mean, we're going to be dealing with heroin, and it's not just going to be methamphetamine. It's going to be the next thing. So the recovery court response is really as fluid as what's going on in the community and what law enforcement is seeing. It's ever changing. Anyone who's heard me speak has heard me say what I would give to be dealing with cocaine is the #1 issue that we were trying to combat. We're not anymore. And so that's a whole different system and a whole different structure. So what drug court looks like today, next year, court's going to look different because the issues are going to be different.
Ms. Monroe?
Well, can you come back to us with our next meeting with staff estimates?
Possibly. Depends on when your next meeting is.
Yeah, well, we don't meet every 2 weeks, so.
Yeah, if it's next week, probably not.
But I mean,
Probably
could
the end
you-
of next month.
Yeah,
We can probably do something.
End of February.
Yes, sir. Possibly February 24th, if that works with everybody. But that's,
and a list of the different types of facilities that you talked about, too.
I can probably come up with something.
Our semi-annual judges conference, it's is that Tuesday and Wednesday? One of those days you threw out, Monday night? Tuesday?
24th is Tuesday.
Okay. I'll actually be in Nashville when I conference. It's Tuesday and then Wednesday, and then I'm back.
You'd be
So-
back Wednesday, the 25th?
That night. It doesn't get
Oh,
done
okay.
until late. So I throw that out there too. That's the only time I can think of where I'll be out of town.
I'm looking at the calendar.
Other than perhaps, could you do it like could you do it the first week of March? I don't know what your calendar's like.
Actually,
You want to do it the week before the 24th?
there's February 18th, which is a Wednesday.
It's fine.
That would be the night before county commission. February 18. Okay. Okay, let's, would the 18th, would that work good for both you guys?
We'll make it work.
At 5:30? Okay.
I may run late. I'm actually doing a cost docket, but I know every month I do that where I bring them back in. Hey, Paige, you better show up so I can address the issue with you. But I'll be out here. I'll be down in time. It's 5:30, right?
It's 5:30 on February 18th, Wednesday.
Okay, and we'll try to get your information. I don't know. I'll have you something.
Okay. Thank you all very, very much. Very informative, and
Thank you.
thank you so much. You as well, Mr. Stallions. Thank you.
Just for the minute's sake, is it a fair representation for me to say that the two judges were in attendance due to the our invitation and to address questions?
Yes, sir.
We appreciate you putting the invitation that way.
Next item, F2, other business. Commissioner Monroe.
Okay. I certainly am not saying this to diminish anything because we've had a very productive conversation, and I'm glad we had that, and I'm glad they were here. I'm glad the public interest, that they're there and that we've had this dialogue and discussion. I think it's wonderful. spent, this previous commission spent $95,000 of taxpayer money on a report. I know some people are not real happy with that report, but we do owe it to the public for the commission to have a public discussion on that report. Originally, the man that did the report was going to give a presentation to the commission, and for some reason that got canceled and it has never happened. So I would like to forward to the commission as a commission item a recommendation to hear from the project director of this report. It could be at the February meeting, it could be at the March meeting, but we owe it to the public since we spent $95,000 of taxpayer money to have a hearing. So I forward that in the form of a motion as a recommendation. No, I was told he would go on Facebook for free, or Skype for free. We don't have to fly him. And I meant that in the form of he would appear on Skype or something. I wasn't talking about flying him in. So there wouldn't be any real taxpayer expense here.
Exactly, yes. Let's be very specific about that motion of.
Yeah, I'm not looking to spend any money to fly him in. I just want this to, he can appear on Skype or FaceTime or whatever it was called, and just have a discussion.
Make sure I've got this. Forward the jail report to the full commission and request a teleconference with the consultant in a public forum.
We've already forwarded the report. It's already been forwarded back in, I think, November.
Okay. So the recommendation from this body, let me talk through it so I can make sure I got it written down right. The recommendation that you're making is that the full commission hold a teleconference with the consultant in a public setting.
Yes, yes.
All right.
Was that part of this, when he did this report, was that part of the agreement that he would do that? I'm just curious.
He said he would.
Just, I mean, was it included in the cost? That's what I'm trying to say. Or was that an additional to do this?
Not coming back here. We would have to pay for him to come back. You're talking about Dr. Kalmanoff, but
Yep.
he would do, he's willing to do it on the
The
Skype.
motion is request county commission hold a teleconference with the consultant in a public setting. It's not that he appear, that's not the motion, just says that we hold a teleconference. So there would be no cost. You're correct, Captain, that he did offer to do whatever we would like for him to do. No, he just said, he may say that, but that's up to us to decide if we want to do that or not. That's not the motion.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor.
I'll second it.
Have a second.
Okay.
Roll call.
Adams. Yes. Carver.
Yes.
Kaler. Yes. Hedrick.
Yes.
Monroe. Okay. Motion passes.
Motion carries. Okay, the next item is the next meeting. which I think we're all, at this point, pretty comfortable with Wednesday, February 18 at 5:30. And we'll follow up with everybody on that. I think it's
That's fine. Yeah, Mr. Chairman, the gentleman standing in the back here all night is Mr. Bob Bass from TCI.
Yes, sir.
And he was very, very instrumental in helping us get this partnership formed.
Okay.
And he volunteered to drive a long way to be with us tonight to answer any of your questions if you have about exactly what we're doing here, what we need to be thinking about. And
Great.
so,
Yes, sir. Please come forward. Yes, sir.
Yes, I am, the name is Bob Bass. I am the County Corrections Partnership Coordinator for Tennessee Corrections Institute. So I'm working presently with about 34 counties. We're in our third year of operation. So you were one of the first that we contacted that had issues. So I guess it's been a little over 2 years ago I came down and we started working together. And I want to say I appreciate all the work that the committee's done in the past, and I heard some good things here tonight. I want to compliment the judges I heard some great things, what they're trying to do. And I want to address some of the things, and I'll try to be brief, that I kind of heard tonight, some comments on. Start with, let's just make sure who we are, for those of you who don't know. We're the ones that audit the jail annually to make sure it meets our 130-some-odd standards in the state of Tennessee. If you can't do that, we come back in 60 days. If you can't do that, you can file a plan of action. It has to be a reasonable plan of action and one that shows measurable progress. Then our Board of Control will vote on that. And that's exactly what we did for December of 2014. You kept your certification even though you had several fixed ratio deficiencies in your facility. You had several problems in your facility based on the overcrowding. The County Correction Partnership is a brainchild of our director, Beth Ash. She found in what she thought would be a good avenue to put together committees, not just jail committees like we see in some counties, or building committees, but a County Correction Partnership Committee that would bring all the stakeholders together, anyone that would bring a force on this subject to help you with these issues. And I'll say this, I was proud to be chosen because I am the senior inspector at TCI. I have been involved in over 28 facilities being built across the state, presently involved in about 7 that are going up, and gone through all the issues and heard all the arguments I've heard here tonight. You're not unique. You're not the first one to have to go through these problems. What is unique is things change a little bit from county to county. The overcrowding is there. If we give you that certification, that means, in essence, you're meeting state guidelines and running a constitutionally correct jail. Because our standards are based on correctional standards, Tennessee State Constitution, United States Constitution, and cases across the country where federal judges have ruled. And unfortunately, I've had a great length of experience with that. And deemed an expert in federal court, I've had to go to federal court with several jails that were sued by inmates because of civil rights violations in 1983. That being said, presently you are certified. Starting January 28th, our new standards, which were just updated, take in effect, and we will start the inspection cycle again. That means that your inspector will come unannounced. You never know when we're coming. They will do the inspection of the facility. As Captain can tell you, it's quite involved. 6 or 7 hours are over there in their way, looking at the 14 areas of compliance, and that's from the physical plant to medical to kitchen to discipline, all these things that we have to do to run a constitutionally correct jail. Now, you can see those standards on our website. Starting January 28th, they changed a little bit. We adopted American Corrections Association standards. Those standards that were more stringent, we kept. Now, let me make some comments about what I've heard so far tonight. Now, I thought it was all good. I really liked the way you're actively engaged. I enjoyed your questions because you're looking for knowledge, and that's what CCP is all about. My job is to help you get that knowledge. So it's education-based. Your jail is grossly overcrowded. Right now, the numbers are down. You're at 481 today, but we're looking probably, you're going to be somewhere around 600 come summertime. What happens when it warms up? They get outside, they get in trouble. There's places they can go, right? They're not at home playing Nintendo or watching HBO. Your classification is ineffective. It's not working. Anytime in correctional standards we say that a jail is above 90%, I'll give you some statistics, I got a lot of them. 90% above that, your classification doesn't work. You can forget it, it's not gonna work. So that means I'm gonna end up putting a non-compatible in a cell with somebody that's compatible. In other words, layman terms, I'm gonna put a axe murderer in there with a jaywalker. Or I'm going to put somebody in there with a sexual predator. We're just going to make a mistake because we ain't got a place to stack them. Now, the captain and his staff are doing everything they can to get that done. And I think they're doing a good job of it. But it's only going to take that one time, and we end up in front of the federal court. And I shouldn't say we, but I just take ownership when I'm out in these counties working. You end up in federal court, and you lose all control. Because the federal judge is going to take over, and he's not going to listen to the debate we just heard and all the good things about programs and putting this here and putting that there and what kind of impact it's going to make. He's going to tell you to add on to that jail. They can do that. I know you don't want to be there. I know you don't because you're here tonight having those discussions like you have been for the last 2 years. You're being proactive. But what's going to happen when we come do that inspection, and I'm just here to help you understand that. Could be this summer, could be this fall. I can't tell you when. They're going to ask for measurable progress. You're going to have to file another plan of action to say this is what we've done. And I hope you've got a good report for them. You've done something to reduce your population, or you've made a decision to go a direction. And I appreciate you taking your time. You're diligent, and be diligent in that. You need to make a decision that's going to impact for the next 15 years. I think the first time I came here, I told you the story about I don't want to be back here talking about what were we thinking. We need to get all the facts. We need to put everything together so you're educated about the issues. I like your comments about the building. Now, I don't know why we're talking about a women's jail, because if you took all 97 of those women out of there right now, you would still be overcrowded and not certified. Now, I'm not in the loop, so I don't know what was discussed or said. And I only know bits and pieces of that report. But what I'm coming away with is that report you paid for is not the product you were really looking for. Yes, that building will have to have code. Not only does it have to have the codes, which we are part of, commerce and insurance, although it's not my purview. I work in the inspection of the jail side. You're going to meet our 130-odd jail standards. And then you're going to have it staffed properly. And then you're going to have a second budget for that. And then we're going to have to deal with meals, and we're going to have to deal with transporting them back and forth to the court. There's just 1,000 questions, a sundries list of what's going to come if you do something like that. Now, retrofitting a building is not unique. I can take you to several places that's been done, and successfully, but it comes with a cost. Sometimes a lot higher than just building it new. And I know a little bit about that. I got a crazy idea. I was going to take a 1942 arts and craft home and remodel it for my dwelling where I live now, and there's days I wished I hadn't had that crazy idea. This is what, and I'll take questions and anything you want to ask me tonight. If I don't have the facts for you, I'll be more than happy to get them. I brought my card, leave you my email, my information. But I would like to offer this, Mr. Chairman. I think it would serve you all well if you would allow me to conduct a workshop, along with Jim Hart with CTASC, and along with your inspector. I'll tell you what we would be actually doing. We would go back and look at the work you've done together, do an itemized list, step by step, what you've seen. Again, make sure we understand what the challenges are. How do we retain that certification? And help you find a clear path and a direction. Now, that's what I'm taking away with the communication, the letters I've gotten. That's not going to cost you a dime. It's not going to cost you anything. What, 2.5 years ago, Captain, I did the snapshot, and it's only worse than cents. So I put together all those statistics, and I said this is what the population is going to be. The study that you have, did he give you an idea what your population was going to be 6 years from now? No. So he didn't say your population is going to grow and these are what the beds you're going to need 10 years from now. He did do that?
Yeah, he basically told us that if we didn't do something, we were going to have to spend a range of several $1 million to address the population. And then at that time, if I remember correctly, we'd still be overcrowded because we've not fixed the problem.
Is that fair, Captain?
I'm getting a copy of that sent to me because it was shared, part of it was shared with Jim Hart, shared some of that with me, the jail consultant, and the staff has shared some of that. I think that's probably focusing on programs more than the core issue. Now, the programs are going to help because they're cycling inmates through that jail faster. And as the judges so readily pointed out, that recidivism rate needs to be cut so we don't see those folks again. We're running a revolving door, aren't we? So, and that's not just a jail issue or anybody's, it's a community issue, and I see it everywhere. Right now, to get a female captain in the TDOC program, to get them to sent to the pen, we're looking at 2 years easy. Easy. 4,000, over 4,800 right now are in contractual agreements across the state of Tennessee, just in county jails that they're holding on contract. There's another 4,000 they're just holding. And there's over 8,000 on pretrial status in felony court. So that's what's out there on the wings. So that's what's coming at us. I'm going to share with you at the end, or you can go get that snapshot analysis report with all those statistics. It's a great form. I look at it. They update it monthly. It's done by Research and Planning TDOC. So I'll give you the website for that. But I would love the opportunity to come in, sit down, and what I literally do is literally get a flip chart out, and we identify all the things that are going on and what's happening, and take all the members of this board through that. I'll coordinate that with you, the sheriff, the captain. We pick a day we could do that. I'd like for you to give me a good 2 hours at least, okay? And there'd be a little conversation prior to that. I would ask you to send in what data you have so far and what's been done so far. Here's the rub. I'm a country boy, so I just talk plain, okay? I don't know what's going to happen this year. It's up to that board. They make the decision. But I will tell you what the law says. It says a reasonable plan. That's not always easy. Part of my job and my responsibility, and I take it Boy, I love my job, and I love working with the county commissioners. Is to get you educated, bring you up to speed, and talk about where they're at, what's going on in the jail, who those people are, what those population trends are doing, what the classification issue is, and some long-range goals. And you were here at the very first meeting, and y'all are doing exactly what I suggested to do, and I appreciate that. You did go out, you did ask for a study. They did pay attention tonight. I did the snapshot. We talked about the stats and what's going on at the jail. It's not getting any better. I'm a firm believer in programs, being a former jail administrator myself. You heard it a while ago. It's not all the answer. And no one's going to be able to give you a percentage on the impact. Me and the captain disagree a little bit. I would take huge out of my verbiage. I would say it would impact the jail population, but I just don't know if I would go as far as say huge. And I can tell you stories in other counties and what's going on and share those with you without calling names. And of course, my favorite is the ankle bracelet, because I just had a county try that. And they put 6 out at that morning around 8 o'clock. And they arrested those 6 at 9 o'clock that night. They assumed they didn't work at the beer joint. So undoubtedly they did work at the beer joint. You know, like, really? You're not where you're supposed to be. I know Mr. French had other commitments tonight, and the sheriff and couldn't be here, but I did stop, Mr. Chairman, and I visited with them, and I made that recommendation to them, and they were happy with that too. If it would please, I would be more than happy to do that. We have actually done this in other CCP committees. Since I am the coordinator, I set that up and bring some stakeholders in, and we wouldn't do it in this atmosphere. We'd do it at a table. They've got one up there at the jail. It'd be a great place if we want to pull stats and data, because they could just go to the computer and get it for us, if that's possible. And I'll tell you this, if you would like to do a little reading on how it works in other counties, in Bedford County, I'll mention them, Bedford County Gazette, if you'll go look at last week, we had a town hall meeting where their detention facility specialist, their inspector, Miller Meadows, and Jim Hart actually just sat at a table with about 65 town folks and answered their questions. And I'll tell you what, it was very civil, very informative, and people went away very pleased with what took place. And so you can imagine there was some naysayers in the room, because they're looking at a really, really big project, a lot bigger than yours. They're looking at a big criminal justice center that's going to have to be built, and there's talk maybe about taking it off the square. So that brings up other issues too. They've got 5 sites they're looking at. I mean, so there's a lot going on. We've been down there working with them about 2.5 years, and we're getting now into the feasibility study, which CTASC is doing at no charge. When that's done, that'll give them a projection of where the population is going to be in the next 20 years and how many beds they need to build, and not only how many beds, but the type of beds. Type of beds is important. Is it open dormitory where we can put minimum security, or is it max where it's 2 persons? I want to compliment you again on your meeting tonight, and they have been keeping me informed. I am available, even though I live 7 hours from here. If y'all ever want me, just reach out to me. But tomorrow I'll also be conducting a meeting with your neighbor next door that's going through some of the same issues. So I was in the neighborhood and thought I would stop by. And I'd like to offer that. If y'all would like to have that meeting where you sit down with me and go through the educational part of it, it'll include jail liability, jail planning, decision making. I'd love to do that for you.
Commissioner Monroe.
Okay. I move that we set a meeting. Do you have your calendar?
You know, I have a calendar, but right now there's probably 20 people above my pay grade deciding where I'm going to be.
Okay.
So it would be best for me if I was allowed to, and I also have to look at 2 other people's schedule that aren't with me tonight.
we could.
Will
we
that
could
work for
together
you?
in order-
How about I move that the chairman get with you and set a date to make it happen. How about that?
Second. If that was a motion.
We don't even have to do a motion.
I don't think you have to
do
do a
we?
motion
How
on
about, we just make that the future meeting?
He was looking for the verbiage on that one. That would have been tough, but yeah.
No, that was pretty concise. I just don't know that it's necessary.
Simple. I like that. Get with Bob
Yeah.
and y'all set it up.
Well,
Let me ask you this. What is the best day for everybody here? Is there a good day or bad day? Okay. All right. We'll probably be talking about a Tuesday. We'll stay away from church night. Do that.
yeah,
Tuesday
yeah,
or
that's,
Thursday.
I'll call you and we'll see what we can set up as first available.
Thank you so much. And once again, I appreciate what y'all do, your public service. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if you don't care, if we could get cards from you afterwards?
I've got it. I brought plenty.
Okay.
They're $1 a piece.
Okay. Public input on items not on the agenda? Anyone else? Seeing none? Second. All in favor, saying aye. Motion passed, meeting adjourned.